This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the GSMC Sports Podcast, which is brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Kayvon. Really excited starting off the show tonight with a guest. We're having on Greg Swartz here. Greg Swartz, great writer, NBA writer for Bleacher Report, does a fantastic job. Go check him out on Twitter. That's at Greg SwartzBR. Definitely worth the follow. A lot of great content. It's obviously been a very big topic of conversation. Some people love it. Some people hate it. Some people are still trying to figure it out. What are your thoughts on the play-in tournament? And I know it's the first time and it was just 2 games, but after seeing what was last night, which let's be real about it, was not good basketball. It was 2 pretty bad games. Does that change your opinion at all? Do you like the play-in tournament? Do you want to see the NBA keep it going? Just give us your thoughts on the play-in tournament as we started off here.
Yeah, in terms of quality of games, I think the first 2 were kind of a flop, but I mean, that's just 2. You know, I'm sure we'll see more competitive games in the future. I think it's great. I think it's added a lot of excitement towards the end of the season. You know, certainly once you get into, post-trade deadline, a lot of teams that, are kind of fading towards the end, they don't have a whole lot to play for except for a draft pick. So, I think if you look at a team like Washington, I think that's the poster child for why this has been successful, because the Wizards were one of the bottom 3 teams in the East for so long, and it looked like they didn't have a whole lot to play for, and then they have that kind of northern light that we only have to get them in the top 10. So being able to do that and working their way all the way up to 8, for a team that got hit by COVID and started out slow, that the play-in tournament may have very well prevented them from tanking and resting guys like Russ and Bradley Beal, obviously, was hurt at the end, but, kind of their stars, were playing when they were healthy. So, and they were rewarded for it. So I think it's been great for the league. I think it's added a lot of excitement. The only really tanking talk you hear is from, like, the very, very bottom seeds, like the Houston, Minnesota, Detroit, Orlando, Cleveland, OKC. So if you can reduce tanking talk to like 6 teams out of 30, that's pretty good. Because before it was a lot more than that. So the fact that we were talking about up until the very last game of the season, seeding who was going to get the top 6, who was going to fall to 7 and 8, who was going to get those last 2 spots to 9 and 10, it added a lot of excitement towards the end of the year. And I think that's what Adam Silver and the league want. They want that excitement. And then obviously you get a matchup like LeBron versus Steph Curry in a play-in game, you're going to get some really good ratings there as well.
Without a doubt, and I think you hit it on the head, the whole idea to try and limit tanking as much as possible, and Washington was a great example that you used there. It gave them life, it gave them a purpose to really go for it, and I agree, I'm with you, I love it. And speaking of that game tonight, which the league did luck out. Look, we don't know how many times we're going to get something like this in a playing game, but it's going to be phenomenal. I mean, the ratings might be higher than any other first-round game that we see. In your opinion with the Lakers, we know what's going on, the injuries, that their season's been derailed, AD, LeBron hurt, Schroeder out for some games. With them now getting healthy, even though they're the 7th seed, even though if they win, they're the 7th, or if they win the next night, they're the 8th, if they do make it into the playoffs, are they still, in your eyes, the team to beat in the West right now as long as they win and get into the playoffs here? Or are you a little bit hesitant because of the injuries and you like someone else moving forward?
It is completely dependent on LeBron's ankle. Mm-hmm. That's what all of this comes down to. If LeBron's ankle is good to go, it doesn't give out on him. He can play 35, 40 minutes a night on there with very limited restrictions. You have a healthy Anthony Davis. I still would take the Lakers over any other team. And maybe that's because I'm from Northern Ohio. I covered the LeBron teams up close when he was here the last 4 years. I covered him in the finals. Just seeing him up close and just the way that he takes care of his body and prepares. And, this guy has never missed a playoff game, ever. Just incredible durability. So he's going to do everything he possibly can to be out there. The last year he was here in Cleveland, the Cavs, they had a miserable regular season. They flipped the roster. They fell to the number 4 seed. And he said all year long he did not care what seed they got. He said, just get me to the playoffs. Let's get everybody healthy. And I feel like we have as good a chance as anybody. And I think if they get the 7 seed, I feel pretty good about their chances. I nothing against Phoenix, but I think Utah at their best is on a different level still from Phoenix, especially when you talk postseason where, you have all these Jazz guys that have played and gotten that postseason experience. Knicks, you really only have one. You have Chris Paul. Everybody else has not taken their lumps in the playoffs yet. So if the Lakers win, they beat Golden State, they get that 7th seed, they get Phoenix in the first round, I think it's a really good matchup for them just because of that inexperience. And then I think you're going to see that story flip real quick between, the Lakers, they snuck into the playoffs and they were the 7th seed or the 8th seed or whatever they were. And then all of a sudden, if they get Phoenix in the first round and they knock them out or in 4 games or 5 games, LeBron's ankle looks good, all of a sudden everybody is going to jump back on that Lakers bandwagon that was off. Because if you have a healthy LeBron in the playoffs and you give him a talent like Anthony Davis, I'm still taking them over every other team if that ankle is healthy from LeBron.
Yeah, it's really remarkable how he has not missed a playoff game, and watching him and covering him up in person like you did, I can't even imagine what that was like. And so I completely agree, because I think AD is a huge mismatch, and he is a bigger mismatch when LeBron is obviously out there facilitating and doing everything he can. LeBron is going to be the engine for what the Lakers do. Let's look at the other team in LA. There's a lot of talk about the Clippers tanking the last 2 games so that they could dodge the Lakers. I don't know if you buy into that at all, but I just, as a whole, to me, the Clippers aren't getting as much talk when it comes to teams with pressure. I think because of how the team was constructed, getting rid of some guys like Shea Alexander, bringing in Paul George and Kawhi the first season, there was a lot of talk of them getting special treatment. They blew that terrible lead 3-1. They've never made a conference final. Their owner, he's very rich. He wants to win. I just think that this is a huge year for the Clippers to at the very least, make the conference finals, if not even the NBA finals. And if not, we could maybe see something happen with this team. What are your thoughts on the Clippers as a whole? Do you think they have a shot to make a deep run? Do you like their roster? Do you think they're not getting talked about enough? Just tell us what you think about the Clippers as we head into the playoffs.
Yeah, I think the Clippers have kind of flown under the radar just because you've got teams, like the Jazz and the Suns that have done so well, and then, everybody's focusing on the Lakers and where they were going to end up in the playoff standings. The Clippers have kind of been quiet, and they've fallen to that 4 seed. They're going to get Dallas in the first round again. I'll say this, going back to just my personal experience, Ty Lue, obviously the Cavaliers coach, have seasons, won the championship for him. Ty Lue is an excellent playoff coach. I did not always like what he did in the regular season. I didn't always like his rotations. But he is an excellent game prep, after timeout guy. He is tremendous with his star players, the way he challenged LeBron when he was here. There's a great story about, it's Game 7 of the 2016 NBA Finals. LeBron's giving it all he's got. They get to halftime in the locker room, and Ty Lue is calling out LeBron, saying, "You need to be better. You need to give me more." And he's basically just ticking LeBron off and just getting him to that next level. How many coaches would have the guts to do that at that stage in that moment? And that he may have to do that at times with Paul George or Kawhi Leonard. Be like, look, you had 20 points in the first half. I need more. You had 25 points and 10 boards in the first half. I need more. He is just an excellent motivator, and you give him, a game or a day or two off in between these games, he can correct a lot of the mistakes, that they made the previous game. I'm a big Ty Lue fan just from his time in Cleveland and covering him, and I think that they are going to beat Dallas. I think, it's going to be a good series, and obviously it was a good series last year, going to 6 games when they played. And I just think, again, health is always a big thing. Mm-hmm. But you have a guy in Kawhi that's proven he could be the number one guy on a championship team. I think Paul George, as rough of a time as he had in the playoffs last year, I thought he really responded well this year, and he can absolutely be, the best number 2 guy. Him and Anthony Davis, probably the best number 2 guys in the entire league. I think the Clippers have the talent to win the championship. I would put them right up there if LeBron's, ankle doesn't hold up, because I believe in Ty Lue and I believe in that roster. I think he's gotten a lot of flack for, trying to duck the Lakers or whatever, but he was honest when he said, look, if you look at my track record, that's what we did in Cleveland. The last couple of days of the regular season, we did rest guys. The one exception being in the 2017-18 season, LeBron had played all 81 games up to that point. He wanted to play game 82 to play all 82 for the first time in his career. Ty Lue was not going to tell him no at that point. So Ty Lue has lied to the media when I've been in the room many times about things. He usually tips it pretty well. I think he was telling the truth this time, and his Clippers are certainly as talented as any team in the league when fully healthy.
That is an awesome story about Ty Lue going up to LeBron, and if he's willing to do that to LeBron, then just like you said, he will be totally fine doing that to acquire Paul George. Great stuff, man. Greg Swartz here, NBA writer for Bleacher Report. Follow him on Twitter, Greg Swartz BR. I know you touched on the Jazz a little bit when comparing them to the Suns. But just in your mind, how legit are the Jazz, Greg? I mean, are they conference finals legit? Are they NBA finals legit if the things break? Obviously, like everything else, Donovan Mitchell, the injuries, that's going to be a big part. What are your thoughts on the Jazz?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit it. I mean, a lot of it's going to depend on Donovan Mitchell. It's not like, he doesn't have a LeBron-like impact or whatever where, okay, if LeBron doesn't play, the Lakers don't have a chance. Mm-hmm. If Donovan Mitchell doesn't play, the Jazz still have a chance. Obviously he's the leading scorer for that team. He was, just tremendous in the first round of the playoffs last year, averaging about 35 points per game. And he has an ankle injury now too, so that's going to be a big part for Utah. However, I think they have so much talent and they're so spread out there, and they have such a good defense. Number 1 rated defense in the league this year per cleaning the glass. I think that they can win. They can win a game 100-95 if they need to. And if you have Bogdanovich and Jordan Clarkson, another guy that I covered in Cleveland, Mike Conley, any of those guys can go for 20-plus points, on any given night. Or, Clarkson's a guy that can get you 30 or 40 some nights if he gets hot as well. So Mitchell's injury is obviously a concern. I don't think they're, they won't even sniff the NBA Finals if he's not healthy. But, that's a team that, depending on who they play in the first round, I think they're going to win in 4 or 5 games, unless it's a healthy Lakers team. But if they get a Warriors team, if they get a Grizzlies or Spurs team, whoever it may be, I think, they're definitely going to come out of the first round this year like they should have done last year. Rudy Gobert, we had to do our awards picks for Bleacher Report. I was in charge of picking Defensive Player of the Year. For all the talk that Ben Simmons got this year, and he was excellent on defense, Gobert was by far, man, if you look at all the defensive metrics, if you look at, if you watch Jazz games and you just see the impact he has just by being there, just the fear that guys have of driving into the lane because he's there and he's 7'2" and has that 7'9" wingspan or whatever it is, and led the NBA in block shots and just has a terrific opponent field goal percentage at the rim. For me, he was easily the defensive player of the year. And I'm being from Ohio, I'm obviously a big Mike Conley fan from his days at Ohio State, and just a tremendous season he had as well. So that's a veteran team. It's a team that's playoff tested now. Obviously, it's going to depend on Donovan Mitchell's ankle, but that's a team that, again, we talked about the Clippers and the Lakers having the talent to win an NBA championship. I think the Jazz are right there because of that defense, and I think their scoring is good enough. There's very few teams that I think could win a title, but I'd throw Utah in there as well.
Yeah, I love that pick of Rudy Gobert, and sometimes I think he doesn't get the attention he deserves because he's in Utah, because he's more of a traditional big, doesn't step out and shoot the three ball, but he really is phenomenal, and he's helped this team a bunch when Donovan's been out. And two things that we know in the playoffs: if you can play defense and if you can get hot from behind the arc, you have a chance, and Utah can do both of those. Greg Swartz here, Bleacher Report, NBA writer, does a great job. I want to flip over to the East here. We really enjoy having you on, man. And I just look, the East is interesting to me, and I just are the Bucks gonna do it again, man? They had the Heat. Is it gonna happen again? Are they gonna end up collapsing against the Heat, or is it different this year? I personally think it feels different, but it's hard to just say it is because, again, we got to see them in the playoffs. What are your thoughts on the Bucks? Can they move forward this year?
Man, I really, I shouldn't root for one team or the other, but I want Milwaukee to beat Miami so bad. Just because, I watched a superstar play for a small market team who left that small market team twice, and I love Giannis signed an extension with Milwaukee, and I just thought, how cool is that arguably the best player in the league is saying, no, I don't want to go to LA, I don't want to go to New York, I want to stay here and continue to build. And I want to see that rewarded. I do. I think it's better when you don't have all these stars flocking to the big markets and you have, franchises like Milwaukee and Cleveland and these small market teams do well. So I would love to see Milwaukee beat Miami. Obviously, the big change is, the Bucks have Drew Holiday now, which is extremely important. Holiday, has just had tremendous playoff performances previously in his career. If you look back to, New Orleans when he was shutting down Damian Lillard and C.J. McCollum in their first round series a couple years ago, he's just such a terrific player on both ends of the ball. Milwaukee too, I think, and they didn't do this a lot in the regular season. I would love to see them use Giannis as their center because he has the size and he has the strength. And if you put four shooters around him, I just think that would be an incredibly difficult lineup to try to guard. And you have a guy in PJ Tucker now that can play the four when Giannis is at the five. You put Middleton out there, DiVincenzo, Drew Holiday. I just think that would be such a devastating lineup they could use. But Miami scares me because, we looked at them last year, same thing. They were the underdogs. They can obviously turn it on as needed. Jimmy Butler is absolutely the alpha that can lead that team. Tyler Hero, he didn't have the season a lot of people thought he would. I know because he was on my fantasy basketball team. He just did not produce the way some people, including myself, thought he was going to do. So, is he going to get hot in the playoffs again? Because if you bring a guy like Hero off the bench and he scores 30 points like he can do, Milwaukee doesn't have anybody that can do that. So, if you're looking just starting lineup, I think the Bucks are just, overwhelm them with talent. But if you go 7, 8, even 9 deep, I think Miami's got a really good chance in this. So, I hope Milwaukee wins. I really do, just to see, Giannis rewarded for signing that contract, but man, Miami's so tough. You can't bet against them.
I'm with you, man. When I saw the final draw come out and I saw what was happening with they had a chance to get the 2 seed, and when it didn't happen and I saw Miami, I just immediately I felt for Giannis. I hope it's different. I hope you're right, because I actually think that, and this brings me to my next question, if the Bucks do get past Miami, it's a huge confidence booster. They're already an extremely talented team. They just needed to be able to do it in the playoffs, and you do it against a team like Miami. You had great success against the Nets in the regular season. I mean, they could keep it rolling and really end up doing something in the playoffs if they can just get past a really well-coached and talented team in Miami, which brings me to the Nets. Are they clearly the clear-cut has-to-be favorites coming out of the East in your eyes, or do you like the 76ers, who I don't know, for some reason it feels like they're not getting talked about enough right now before the playoffs start, but maybe that's just what I'm listening to and hearing. But overall, are the Nets, they just, it's hard to bet against them for you right now, or do you actually think because of the injuries, the lack of continuity, maybe the Bucks or the 76ers could possibly come out of the East instead?
I still would pick Brooklyn to come out of the East. I mean, Milwaukee's got if Milwaukee beats Miami, then they have to beat Brooklyn. And, assuming Brooklyn wins, I think we can assume Brooklyn's going to win the first round. And if they beat Brooklyn, then most likely they have to play Philly. So if you talk about just a meat grinder to get out of the East, seeding-wise, they did not catch any breaks. Brooklyn, I mean, again, I covered Kyrie up close and personal. Mm-hmm. I saw KD way too much than I wanted to see him when he was with Golden State, destroying the Cavaliers in Cleveland, finals after finals. Just, I mean, the ungodly amount of talent on that team. And I think all three are at a point in their career, it's kind of like Boston in 2008. Mm-hmm. They were thrown together, but they still won a championship in the first year together because they were all at that point in their career. Nobody was worried about their brand. Nobody was worried about ego at that point. They just wanted to win. And I think when KD and Kyrie came together, they made that assumption. It's like, we've done all the individual stuff. Mm-hmm. We've won championships. We know what's important to us. And when they bring in James Harden, he's that guy that can still provide that fire because he hasn't won. He hasn't tasted that, where you have champions around him. I watched a couple of Brooklyn games this year where, I thought James Harden was being way too unselfish, where, the last couple of years he would take 20-plus shots a game, and, he would score 40 or 50 points, and his teams would still lose at times, especially in the postseason. He is such an incredible passer where he can get into the lane, a defense has to collapse on him, and then you have Kevin Durant, you have Kyrie Irving, you have Joe Harris, who's led the NBA in three-point percentage. You could space all of those out around him. But that's just not fair. You're not going to guard that. Obviously they have defensive issues at times. Like you said, there's a lack of continuity there. But I think this is one of those Boston situations where, yes, they've been thrown together, and yes, they haven't taken their playoff lumps together, but there's so much postseason experience there already. And there are three guys that are unselfish enough to make it work, that if their help is, obviously they didn't play much together during the regular season, that's my team to come out of the East. I picked Brooklyn to make the finals before the season started, before they added James Harden.
Okay. Wow.
So certainly after they get a guy like Harden, I think Brooklyn's going to come out of the East. And like I said, I would still take a Lakers team with a healthy LeBron to come out of the West.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I love the reference to Boston. You can also even look at LeBron's Heat team in the second year. They kind of came together to decide, okay, LeBron's clearly the one to lead it. I think that's an awesome point. Greg Swartz here. We'll get you out of here on a couple more questions. I want to turn to Cleveland. I know that they're not in the playoffs, but I love the NBA. I loved when LeBron was in Cleveland. I loved Kevin Love playing with LeBron. And I just want to ask you, because you clearly know the team so well, you follow the team, you cover the team, you live there. What is Kevin Love's status in Cleveland moving forward? Do you see him being there much longer with the way the team is trending? Which is my next part of it. Where is this team going? Colin Sexton, he seems like a great player. He's a great scorer. Are they going to build around here? Just give us your thoughts on Cleveland and Kevin Love before we get you out of here.
Yeah, I mean, geographically, this is the closest team to me. This is the team I grew up, kind of cheering for. I was the Cavs lead writer at Bleacher Report for 4 years when they had that position, when they were, going to the finals every year. So this is the team that I pay the closest attention to. And I say this with confidence, there is no trade that exists for Kevin Love. There is none. I would say maybe the only contract that's worse than his right now would be John Wall. And John Wall still averaged 20 points per game this year and was, played a decent amount of games for, a major injury that he was coming off of. Love got hurt the second game of the season. Mm-hmm. They said he was going to be out for 3 to 4 weeks. This dude missed about 3 months. He was in no hurry to come back. He had a strained calf injury, and then I'm watching these games, the game that they came back against Brooklyn. It was the first game with James Harden, and I'm watching him. He's on the line, and, teammates are, jumping on his back as Colin Sexton's hitting threes to send the game to overtime. I'm like, wait a minute. Now, how sore is this guy's calf injury if we got teammates jumping on his back? Darius Garland is jumping on this guy's back, and he's just like, oh, yeah, no problem. How bad is this injury? And it was the same thing 2 years ago when they were clearly tanking, and it was like, all right, we're clearly not in a hurry to get Kevin Love back. He averaged about 12 points, 7 rebounds. He did, his final game, he had 30 points and 14 rebounds or something against the Celtics, and it was like, oh, yeah, that was the Kevin Love we've been looking for. And then the Cavs fans were mad at it because it kind of screwed up the tanking because they beat Boston. And so it was like, oh, thanks, Kevin. You didn't do anything all year. Now you're going to come out and drop 30. I don't think a trade exists for him. I think we're going to go down the same road with Blake Griffin in Detroit, where it's like, look, you don't want to be here. We're clearly going in a different direction. Just give us some of that money back, and we'll work out some sort of buyout. Kevin Love's contract, it's not the worst you've ever seen. It's 31.5 next year, and then the year after that, it actually dips down to 28.5. So it's 2 years and 60. So that final year is at 28.5. So it's not like a John Wall where it's 47 in the final year. So it's not devastating, but it's still pretty bad. I have racked my brain trying to look for trades where, they take back another bad contract, but it makes more sense. I can't find one. Yeah. So I think, and they don't want to give up assets to move him either, especially for a team that needs draft picks and needs young talent. You don't want to give that up. So I would, and this is not reported, but I would guess that those two sides, I love Jeff Schwartz is his agent, that they would have buyout talks this offseason. Again, not reported, not sourced, but that is my hunch, that's what's going to happen. I cannot, if they go into another year with him, he hasn't been happy there for years. Mm-hmm. He has wanted out for years. They have, and they would be open to trading him if they got a decent offer, but they've been so stubborn about they wanted, a first-round draft pick back, or they wanted a second-round pick, or they wanted a young talent. It was like, okay, I think you're overvaluing him here. Mm-hmm. So I think there are going to be buyout talks. Like I said, I don't know if he gets bought out this summer, but I think there's going to at least be talks because he just doesn't make sense with the core anymore. That being said, I really like Colin. I really like Darius Garland. He took a big step this year. After his rookie year, I think everybody was like, ooh, what's he going to be? But he looked really good, averaged about 17 and 6. Last month of the season, he put up over 20 points per game. Isaac Okoro looks like a guy that he's never going to average 20 a game, but he's going to guard every position. Mm-hmm. Jared Allen's a restricted free agent. They're going to pay him, I would guess, up to $20 million a year just to make sure he comes back and that defensive anchor, especially when you have two short guards that don't defend anybody in your backcourt. You need them. So, and Colin Sexton is extension eligible. So it'll be interesting to see, does he get I don't want him to get a max deal. If he gets like a Jaylen Brown 28 a year, I could live with that. But if we're talking max deal, that's too much for him. But the Cavs are interesting, but like so many teams at the bottom, it's going to depend. Do they get that number one pick, or do they fall to like 7 and they just get another guy?
No doubt, and really interesting on the Kevin Love stuff. It makes total sense what you're saying, and that probably is what ends up happening just because the contract and where he's at with his career. All right, man, last thing, we'll get you out on here. I know you said Brooklyn, Lakers, if both are healthy, that's who you got, so we got to put you on the spot. We got to get a winner before we let you go. Who's winning the 2021 NBA Finals if, all things go the way we believe, healthy and everything? Who you got?
If they're both healthy and everybody's there, I'm still going to go Lakers. I cannot pick against LeBron if he has a good ankle, and because the Lakers are such a good defensive team, and LeBron gets the headlines, AD gets the headlines. Nobody talks about their defense. They've been a top 2 to 3 defense in the league for the last couple of years when they have their guys, and I think that's a very underrated quality of them is that defense. So if they're both healthy, and LeBron obviously knows Kyrie and his game very well, he knows Kevin Durant and his game very well, and Brooklyn does not have anybody that can guard Anthony Davis. I think that's important. They don't have anybody that can match up a big. Nick Claxton's not going to do it. Blake Griffin, are you kidding me? Nobody on that team is going to guard Anthony Davis. So I would still go Lakers. I think it would go the distance. It would go 7 games. That was my preseason pick, was Lakers and Brooklyn. I'm going to stick with that. And I refuse to bet against LeBron. I've seen him do it too many times. I saw him do it last year, when obviously in a tough situation as well in the bubble. So I'll go Lakers over Nets. But again, that's assuming that LeBron's ankle holds up.
No doubt, and I'll tell you what, the NBA itself would be very, very happy if that is what the finals is. That's a star-studded finals. I know fans would love that. I would love that. That was my pick too. I would love to see that end up happening, and I just hope we get through a postseason that's everyone's healthy, a lot of good matchups, good games, and we'll see what happens. But again, man, Greg Swartz. Follow him on Twitter at Greg Swartz VR. Thank you so much. We really do appreciate you taking your time out. And I know you got a lot going on, so it means a lot. Thank you, man.
Yeah, absolutely. It should be a good postseason.
Can't wait for it. Enjoy the game tonight. It starts off with a great game tonight, and we'll talk to you down the road. Have a great night, Greg.
All right. Thanks for having me on.
All right, big thank you to Greg Swartz for coming on. Again, that was an awesome interview. What a great job he did. Round of applause there for him. That was really fun to listen to. So, all right, going to take a quick break. When we come down, breaking down the game from last night, Warriors-Lakers. What a game. What a moment by LeBron James. We're talking about it on GSMC Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Kayvon Izami, right after this.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. You are listening to the GSMC Sports Podcast. I am your host, Kayvon Izami. A big thank you there to Greg Swartz, again, NBA writer for Bleacher Report. Awesome job. I mean, I hope you guys enjoyed that interview as much as I did. I think he was fantastic. Some of the stories he told, that was a terrific job by Greg Swartz. Go give him a follow on Twitter. And we'll definitely have him on again because how great of a job he did. We'll have him on throughout the playoffs to talk more about it. And look, what a game we had last night. So it is Thursday. I'm recording that whenever you guys listen to it, however you're listening to it, wherever. We thank you for joining us. This is the GSMC Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Kayvon Izami. And, I mean, the game that we saw last night was just absolutely terrific. The Warriors, the Lakers, Steph Curry, LeBron James, it lived up to the hype, but in so many different ways, right? It was a phenomenal game down the stretch, but it also was pretty ugly on the Lakers side for majority of the game, especially in that first half, right? Then it got sloppy on the Warriors side. So it was a great game. It really took a big turn from what we saw the night before with the Celtics and Wizards, and then that terrible game with the Pacers and the Hornets. So it was great to see a game like that. And even the Grizzlies-Spurs was a great game as well. The Spurs made a big comeback after being down 20+, but they were not able to complete that comeback. So now it will be the Grizzlies and the Warriors in a single elimination March Madness style game. And the NBA, no disrespect to the Grizzlies, they're cheering for the Warriors after what they saw last night, after what we all saw last night, and the performance they put on against the Lakers. They want the Warriors in the playoffs. Everybody wants Steph Curry in the playoffs, so I get that. But look, this is where I got to start the show today, okay? And oddly enough, look, LeBron, my man couldn't see. I mean, it's funny that LeBron is the one that couldn't see for that shot. The beautiful, beautiful shot that LeBron hit, the dagger that LeBron hit to win the game right after he had his eye poked by Draymond Green. And it's funny that because really Steph was the one that shouldn't have been able to see, since LeBron hit that shot right in between his eyes, right? I mean, I did see that right? He had blurry vision. I mean, I think it should have been the opposite things going on there, but I rest my case on that. Maybe we'll bring that up a little bit later. That's not what I'm here to talk about. What I really want to focus on here, LeBron James, the greatest player to ever play, having another Pantheon playoff moment. That shot last night was the second longest shot to win a postseason game in the final minute of the game that we have seen since they started tracking those things in the last 20 years, since they started tracking those stats. The only shot that was longer is the famous Damian Lillard shot that everyone remembers if you're a basketball fan. It was against Paul George and the Oklahoma City Thunder when Dame waved goodbye to everyone. It's like a huge meme nowadays, right? The teammates are jumping on him and his head is just out of the huddle and he's just staring. That was the longest shot. LeBron's last night was the second longest in the history of the NBA. So we could focus on that. We could focus on how that was actually, when you really think about it, LeBron's worst high-leverage playoff game in years. We could focus on that. And he still ended up with 22, 11, and 10, a triple-double. Oh, and the game-winning dagger right in the guy's eye that everybody thought would be the one hitting the dagger, Steph Curry. But instead, I want to focus on what we saw most notably in the second half last night. And this is where I want to start the show here, start this segment, which is playoff basketball. And we're going to get into this more later on in the show. But that second half by the Los Angeles Lakers was real playoff basketball. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, first of all, there is a team out east in Brooklyn that doesn't know what we're talking about right now because they can't do what the Lakers did in the second half. And that is being able to survive your three best players, Dennis Schroeder, Anthony Davis, and LeBron James, going 4 for 28 in the first half. 4 for 28. And they were able to win that game. If you come out in the second half and get stops, the second half last night, the Golden State Warriors made 17 baskets and had 15 turnovers. And over the next 2 months, in the biggest moments, in the biggest games, what you are going to see is it's going to come down to who can get the stops. Who can get the stops on the defensive end? And the Lakers, for all their inconsistencies, for all their injuries, for all the lineup changes and the starting lineup tweaks, the one thing that has been consistent from Game 1 to Game 73 is they are the best defense in the National Basketball Association. And when you add to that the best player in basketball history who just has a knack, I guess is the word I should say, a knack for being clutch, what we saw last night in the second half, you add all that up, that's how you win playoff games in today's NBA. Which leads me to this. Everybody is lamenting the Warriors should have won that game last night, right? I'm hearing that all over. I actually feel the complete opposite. I think the Lakers were definitely the better team. And not only do I think that they were definitely the better team, I am more confident in what I saw last night from the Lakers moving forward than I was entering the game. I think the Lakers showed, and if I told you before the game, LeBron had his worst half as a Laker. He was awful. Anyone who watched the game saw it. He looked disengaged. He looked injured. It was bad. There is no jokes around. It was bad. Steph Curry was on fire. The Warriors were hitting 44% of their threes. 44% of their threes. And the Lakers still won. But I hear today, but Kayvon, the Warriors should have won, Kayvon. What? The Lakers had no juice. They had no injuries, no energy. LeBron and AD were just clearly not ready to play. Dennis Schroeder played as poorly as I've ever seen Dennis Schroeder play with a Lakers jersey on or with any jersey on. And they still won the game. Wow. Isn't that remarkable? Look, in 2021, the game of basketball, majority of the time in 2021, that game would have been over for a lot of teams. Downright over. We see it all the time. All the time. Shoot, we saw Charlotte the night before. Pacers got up big. Charlotte mailed it in. That game could have been over at half. Steph's on fire. Draymond Green was putting on a defensive clinic. This is why Draymond comes out and talks the big game about being the best defender in the NBA, because of what he did in the first half last night to Anthony Davis. That right there is the best defender in the NBA when he plays like that. He put on a clip. He dominated Anthony Davis. The Jordan Poole. Who the heck is Jordan Poole? This dude was draining threes. Juan Tuscan, whatever, Anderson or whatever his name was. The guy was playing ball. And Andrew Wiggins. Don't even get me started on how well Andrew Wiggins played. The Warriors were clicking on all cylinders. And the Lakers still won. Now, you've seen those. You've seen, the last 4 or 5 years as it's become more and more of a 3-point shooting league. blowouts are everywhere. We see it all the time, right? We see blowouts throughout the game all the time. I mean, in the finals in 2016, Warriors and Cavs, and I bring that up because it was Steph versus LeBron last night. 6 of the 7 games were blowouts. Game 7 was the only close game. That's what happens against the best teams sometimes. Now, that is the new NBA because this is the thing about the NBA today. When you get behind, you're playing against an opponent like Steph Curry, or you're playing against an opponent who can shoot a ton of threes. You get desperate, right? You get desperate. You got to catch up. And then you feel like you got to the way to catch up, you start hitting threes. And a 9-point deficit becomes a 16 because your threes aren't falling. And that's all you're doing. It becomes 28. Boom, game over, pack it in. I mean, think about this. If you're a Lakers fan, again, Steph was amazing. Steph played his butt off last night. Draymond looked like the best defender in the league. And I thought Andrew Wiggins, and I want to bring Andrew Wiggins up again because Andrew Wiggins gets a lot of crap. But he has had a phenomenal season. He really has come into his own with the Warriors team. I love seeing him succeed like he has, not just offensively, but defensively. He has become such a good defensive player. Steve Kerr is a great coach. The Warriors shot 44% on threes, and the Lakers won. And LeBron played his worst first half that I've seen him play in probably 5-6 years. In fact, LeBron's plays poorly so infrequently, I can't remember a half like that. I mean, I really was thinking back at it today. When was the last time I've seen LeBron play that bad? And I couldn't remember it. He had no legs. He had no juice. He had no energy. In fact, I look at the Lakers last night and I'm like, this is why they should be favored to win the championship. And I get it. You guys are all saying, Kayvon, you're sitting here going, they sucked. They were terrible. What are you talking about? This is why they should win a championship. Because they still won the game. Because when things mattered most, they showed us Laker basketball. They played defense. They scored buckets when it mattered. LeBron showed he can still be the best player in the game when he needs to be. He was dishing out passes. He was making shots. He was getting fouled and hitting free throws. Anthony Davis goes and scores 14 or 15 points in the fourth quarter. He pumped it up. I mean, they showed why they should be the favorites to win the championship. They did things that other teams can't do. They were great late in the fourth quarter. They were able to get stops. They cut down and this is the thing, they cut down a big deficit not just once, but several times, including in the fourth quarter. They played poorly for long stretches in a playoff-type game and won. Do you know how hard that is to do in the NBA? To play poorly for not just a stretch, for numerous stretches, and still win that game? That's hard. That's really hard to do in today's NBA. So, if you look at what's happening in the NBA since the three-point shot has become such a big part of this game, players are now so good on offense. I mean, centers now shoot the three ball, right? Joel Embiid, Anthony Davis, they step out and shoot a three ball, and that's normal. That's what these teams want from their bigs. Julius Randle hitting threes left and right. More threes equal more points. That is what is taped up on every general manager's wall in their office. More threes equals more points. That's what they want. So when you fall behind by 12, 13, 14, a lot of teams pack it in playoff games, in regular season games, in finals. They pack it in. They become desperate, and they try and match the other team by chucking up a bunch of threes. And that's the worst thing that you can do. That's not what the Lakers did. They stuck to their style of game. They believed in the defense that they play. They played great defense. They got stops, and they turned that into offense. They went out and ran. They made turnovers, and they ran with it. They turned it into offense, and it worked. and it's credit to Frank Vogel, who is a tremendous coach but does not get the credit that he deserves. I thought the Lakers to come back and win last night when so many things worked against them was fantastic. And that is why I think they should be the favorites to win it all, even as a 7th seed. And that's why I am more, I am honestly more excited about, and I'm more of a believer, I should say. I'm more of a believer in the Lakers winning it all after last night's play-in game than I was before the play-in game started. Now, I believe they were going to win it all before it as well, but that game, the way they stuck to their style, the way they made adjustments, the way Frank Vogel showed that he can coach with a coach like Steve Kerr, that showed to me they're ready to roll. Now, injuries is obviously a big thing, and that's going to be the biggest issue. But what they did last night when it mattered and get stops, that's what we're worried that the Brooklyn Nets can't do. That's why the Brooklyn Nets are not a shoo-in to win it all. Can you trust that the Nets are going to get a stop when they need to? Can you trust that they're going to be able to score 120 every night? No, they're not. They're not going to be able to. They're going to have an off night here and there, and if they're not able to get stops when they need to, then they're going to be in trouble. Then they're going to be in a lot of trouble. All right, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, and this is what I was really excited to get to here, I need to address something, ladies and gentlemen. This notion that LeBron's shot last night to win it all was lucky? Really? Is that what we are now doing with this man? Lucky? Oh my goodness. What have you guys and gals gotten into? I'm going to address that next. This is the GSMC Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Kayvon Izami. Don't go anywhere. You're going to want to hear what I have to say.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is the GSMC Sports Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Once again, thank you so much to Greg Swartz for coming on and joining us on segment number 1. That was fantastic. I know I really enjoyed that. I hope you guys did too. Tonight we've got the Wizards and the Pacers playing for the 8th spot in the East. And then tomorrow night we've got the Warriors and the Grizzlies playing for the 8th spot. And that will then round out with the playoffs actually starting on Monday, on Saturday. So 2 days from today, which will be very exciting. That's going to be a lot of fun to watch. I can't wait for it. So let's go into this, all right? As I said, as I ended the show, and the segment, and I want to get right into it here because this is a big conversation for some reason, and it's just, of course it is, because of who we're talking about, LeBron James, and it feels like it's always ends up becoming this type of conversation. So I'm going to be objective here. All right, I'm going to be objective. I always am objective. Let's just be real on that first, though. I am so bothered that this is a question. I when I woke up, and actually I saw it right away. After the game, Stephen A. Smith was on SportsCenter, who, by the way, I love. I think he is the best at what he does. He truly changed sports media for what it is today. Amazing at what he does. He went on SportsCenter after the game and claimed right away, like it was nothing, that LeBron's shot was a lucky shot. So, of course, and I'm not saying this is Stephen A's fault, but this would have happened whether Stephen A said it or not. This is what happens. So, of course, all day today, you hear on TV and radio and everywhere else with your friends talking, texting, was LeBron James shot lucky? That's all the conversation is. So this is part of the conversation in no universe. All right, let me be clear. In no universe, except for the one involving this specific player, would that shot ever be considered a lucky shot. He catches the ball, he squares his shoulders, he beats the shot clock, and it hits almost nothing but net. It's not banked in. He didn't say, I call game and banked it in like Paul George. It doesn't bounce around the rim 80 times like Kawhi's shot from the baseline game winner in Toronto against Philly. He's not. He didn't use an odd shooting form where it was literally 0.1 seconds left and he just turned around and threw it up out of nowhere without looking at it. This is the definition of a clutch shot. And this comment here, what I'm about to say, is the one that makes people mad. Real mad. Even though all the numbers back it up, it was a clutch shot by the most clutch playoff performer in NBA history. The man with the most game winners in playoff history. The man with the most buzzer beaters in playoff history. The man who has hit those shots at the highest percentage of anyone in playoff history, LeBron James, and now just added another one, now in a play-in tournament history, he adds more to. The first ever game winner in a play-in, less than a minute remaining, and by the way, if you call this a playoff game, which it technically is, it's the second longest game winner we have had in 20 years. The only one that was longer was the famous Damian Lillard shot that everyone remembers over Paul George, and he waved him goodbye after. And I'm old enough, and I think a lot of you are that's listening, old enough to remember Dame's shot. And you know what wasn't being discussed after that shot? Lucky shot. Oh my goodness, lucky shot. And I guarantee you, and this right here is what really bothers me. This is what really bothers me about this whole conversation. And everyone out there that is listening knows what I'm about to say is completely true, whether you want to admit it or not. If the roles were reversed and Steph Curry hit a 34-footer in LeBron's eye, I guarantee you we wouldn't be like, oh, Steph's shot was so lucky. Oh, well, that was such a lucky shot. No, we'd be like, oh my goodness, Steph Curry, the greatest shooter ever. Give him the throne. Make him the NBA logo. He's better than LeBron. LeBron can't even compete with Curry. Oh my God, Steph Curry over LeBron. If Curry hit that shot and the roles were reversed, the conversation would be completely different than it is today. So this is why LeBron James wins a title and gets the microphone and says, I want my damn respect. Because he gets a game winner to move into the playoffs. A game winner. And everyone is like, oh my God. LeBron was awful the entire game. He was so bad in the first half. That was a lucky shot. That's what we hear. That's what bothers me. Why is that? No, I want to hear from you at GSMC, at GSMC_sports. And also, you guys know my page at Kayvon_sports. Why? If you're one of those people talking about that like it was a lucky shot, what on earth makes you think that that was a lucky shot? Why? Why is it with LeBron that we're going to deem that it's a lucky shot? And don't try and play like you don't know what I'm talking about. Don't do that. Don't waste my time. I do not want you to waste my time with that. You know exactly what I'm saying is correct. If the roles were reversed, this wouldn't be a discussion. And I said this earlier. I said this. LeBron was not good in the first half. He was not good. He was not himself. He was not himself at all in the first half. And I said it earlier. He didn't play a great game. By the way, if we call this a semi-elimination game, it was probably the worst semi-elimination game or elimination game he's played in at least 5 years. And yet, he still ends the game with the triple-double and the game winner. For some reason, LeBron James is evaluated so much differently. Not than every other NBA player, but than every other NBA superstar. There is something out there, some reason out there, that LeBron James is evaluated way different. So I want the audience. I want the audience, and even if you hate what I say about LeBron James, I get it. I get it. There's a lot of haters out there. Even if you hate, do me a favor. Think about this. Please close your eyes and think about this. Be honest with yourself for a second. If LeBron and Steph's nights, all right, if their night were exactly reversed, if LeBron had been excellent throughout the game, and then in the second half he had 4 turnovers, including a critical one with minutes remaining. He ended up turning the ball over with 2 seconds remaining when they tried to get off a last-second shot. Even though that was tough on Curry, he wasn't able to get the shot off. All right, so he had 4 turnovers, a critical one with minutes remaining. Where after the tournament, he complains about not getting a call. He doesn't get back on defense, and the opposition scores. And Steph struggles throughout the whole night, and then in the final minute, in LeBron's eye, hits a 34-footer to win the game. What is the narrative this morning? If that happens, if LeBron and Steph's night were exactly reversed, right? And think about what I'm saying. LeBron played amazing throughout the whole game, last couple of minutes, turnovers, didn't get back on defense, complained about a couple calls, and then Steph struggled throughout the night, and then in the final minute, hit a dagger from 34 feet out to win the game. What is the narrative this morning? Because the narrative this morning is LeBron hit a shot, LeBron's great, Steph's also great. What a game. Amazing game. Oh, and by the way, LeBron's shot might have been a little bit lucky. If everything were reversed, the narrative would have been, oh my goodness. LeBron once again blows it down the stretch And Steph found a way. And once again, Steph is beating LeBron James in a big game. That's what the narrative would have been. And don't try and say it wouldn't have been. We all know this. Look, if you're living in a realistic world and your brain is really, thinking just in a realistic way, and you're not going out of your way to make up narratives and put narratives in your head and just kind of ignore the truth in front of you, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. There is no doubt about it that the narrative would have been switched. It would have been switched completely. So again, I ask you, why? Why is that the case? At Kayvon_sports. What is it that makes LeBron put on this social media, and maybe that's it, the social media factor, this social media binge of just calling out the flaws and trying to spin it in a negative light, because that's all it is. That's exactly what's happening, right? It's taking something that was beautiful, that was amazing, that did have its ups and downs, but at the end of the day, it ended looking beautiful, and it ended looking amazing. But we're taking that and we're mucking it up for some reason. We're mucking it up, we're changing it up, we're making it look like it's not what really happened. We're not painting the real picture here. And it's my job, and that's why I'm so passionate about this. Look, of course, I'm a LeBron. Everybody that knows me knows I'm a LeBron fan. I like what LeBron represents. I like how LeBron plays out on the floor. I think he is the best basketball player that I've ever seen. And I will stick to that no matter what. But I'm up for debates. I would love for someone to come on and talk to me about why MJ's better. I'd love it. And I would respect it, and I would sit here and I would listen to you, and we would go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I'd love to hear your arguments on Steph Curry and how great he is. I believe he's great too. But I also look at it from the real perspective going on, and that is it's just different. It's just completely different when LeBron does something and the type of magnitude and the type of the just clear reasoning to go out and change what really happened. This question would not be asked all day on TV and radio with Steph or even with KD, only with LeBron. It would not be asked of, was it lucky? It would be more of, wow, he did it. What a shot. He ended the Warriors. He's making them go to a legit single elimination game. And you do hear that some here and there. There are some people that stand up for him, and I love that. But it's just different. It's just different. And again, it wasn't lucky. He catches the ball, he squares up, his shoulders, he beats the shot clock, it hits almost nothing but net. It's not a bank in, it doesn't bounce around the rim. It's a definition of a clutch shot. He didn't have his eyes closed, even though one eye was gouged out from Draymond Green. He did it one-eyed, and he hit a clutch shot. And it just adds to the man with the most game winners in playoff history, the man with the most buzzer beaters in playoff history, the man who has just hit another buzzer beater shot in now play-in game history. That's what it is. And it's just another notch on the most clutch performer in postseason history the NBA has ever seen. This is the GSMC Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Kayvon Izami. Thanks so much for listening. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to wrap things up, talk all about what we want to see now in the playoffs, right? Okay, we're heading to it. We talked with Greg. We're going to kind of break down what he thought of the teams that can win it, the teams that they could, where the Clippers at and all of this, where the 76ers. This will be our last show before the playoffs start, right? So our next show is on Sunday. The playoffs will have already started by then. They start on Saturday. So we're going to get really into, for this last segment, all about some NBA playoff talk. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the GSMC Sports Podcast, the final segment of this beautiful Sunday show. The weather is amazing here in Raleigh, North Carolina. I hope it's the same for you guys wherever you are, however you're listening. I know we have some great listeners all around the U.S. Hopefully, I think maybe some listeners, in other parts of the world too. I hope your weather, your day, your Sunday, your Monday, whenever you're listening to this show, is a beautiful, beautiful day. And I really do appreciate you guys tuning into us. Look, lot of interesting talk here, right? Lot going on in the sports world. As I said earlier in the show, it's one of my favorite times of the year, if not my favorite. You got horse racing, which what's going on with horse racing? That's something I really do want to take my time and do a whole segment on that I might do in the near future. There's just so much going on in sports right now that I haven't had time to do that, but it's sad and it's wrong what is happening in horse racing and what has been happening in horse racing for a long time, and a lot of heads have just been turned, but maybe with what happened at Churchill Downs at Kentucky Derby, things will start to change, and we'll see. But that's something I'll touch on in a later show. But you think about it, we do have the Triple Crown races, we have NHL, we have NBA, and we have football starting, like rookie camps are starting back up. Then we'll have OTAs. There's a lot going on in the sports world. MLB is really underway now. We're seeing a lot of teams separate themselves. We're seeing teams, the ones that started out good that we thought were flukes, they're starting to kind of push back. The Yankees are starting to roll. So a lot of good things going on in the sports world. I hope you're enjoying it as much as I am. So I want to touch on the NBA here. Now, this can be confusing, so follow along. Most of you that follow the sport hardcore, you guys already know this, right? So this is the NBA. I love the play-in tournament, okay? I know LeBron said that, a couple weeks ago, whoever started the play-in tournament should be fired. And I don't think he actually meant that. I think he was just expressing his point and wanted to put some emphasis on it. I don't think he actually thinks whoever started this should be fired. But I actually disagree with LeBron on this. I think the play-in tournament is phenomenal. Look at this. The last 2 weeks of the season, all we have been doing is talking about random Wednesday night games and Saturday games against, the Lakers versus the Pelicans, when usually we don't care about those games because we're just looking forward to the playoffs starting. And it's all about, okay, they're resting their players for the playoffs to start. But no, not with the play-in tournament. All of this is important. We're talking about games as the season runs down because these games are important. So think about it. Today is Sunday. This is the last day of the regular season. The play-in tournament starts Tuesday, right? So the play-in games start on Tuesday. This Sunday, right now, today, there are so many games that have already started or that are starting tonight that have implications still on seeding and whether teams are going to make the actual playoffs or the play-in playoffs tournament. So right now, the Warriors are smacking the Grizzlies, all right? Why is this game important? This game's important because whoever wins this game, which looks like it's going to be the Warriors, now the Grizzlies are making a comeback here. Actually, they're making a big comeback. The Warriors were just up like 20, and now it's 91-84, 7 minutes left in the game. So I do think the Warriors will hold on. The reason that's important is the winner of this game stays in the 8 seed, okay? Why is the 8 seed important? The 8 seed is important because the 7 versus 8 matchup, the winner of that game, they become the 7th seed in the playoffs, right? So win that game, you're in. If you lose that game, you're not out. You then will play the winner of the 9-10 matchup. So if the Warriors hang on and win, the Grizzlies will move to the 9 seed to play the Spurs. So the winner of the Grizzlies Spurs will then move on to play the loser of the 7 versus 8, which is all likelihood going to be the Lakers versus the Warriors. So why it's important to be in the 7 and 8 spot is because you get 2 cracks at it, right? It's not just single elimination. You get 2 chances. The 9-10 spot, it's one game, you lose, you're done. It's literally NCAA format, right? It's March Madness. You're in, you win, you get another chance, you move on to another day. You lose, you're packing your bags, you're traveling to Cancun, you're starting your whole summer vacations and all of that stuff, right? So why is that important for this game? If the Warriors get that 8 seed, they're most likely going to face the Lakers. That is a very tough matchup for them. So they want that 8 seed because if they do lose, they get a second crack at it. Which is why a couple of weeks ago on this very show, I told you guys, and I put my word on it, there's no chance the Lakers lose in the play-in tournament. There's no chance. Okay, let's say the first game, Curry plays out of his mind, drops 40 points, they beat the Lakers. Okay, then they would play the winner of Grizzlies Spurs. They're not losing both of those games back to back. They're just not. I'm telling you that right now. The Lakers will not lose unless AD and LeBron are injured and they don't play. The Lakers will not lose in the play-in tournament. But the Lakers still have a shot to make the actual playoffs. If they beat New Orleans tonight, and the NBA did such a good job, right? They scheduled the New Orleans-Lakers game and the Portland-Denver game all at the same time. So you ask, well, Kayvon, why did those 2 games, what do they have in common? Well, if Portland, who is the 6th seed right now, if they beat Denver, then they're in. They're in the 6th seed. They're in the playoffs. They're good. If they lose and the Lakers beat New Orleans without Zion Williamson, then Portland moves to the 7th seed and the Lakers move to the 6th seed. You understand? The interesting part about this is Denver actually going to play their players? What do I mean by that? Are they going to lose this game on purpose? Right now, the Denver Nuggets are the 3 seed, which means if they win this game, the Lakers will be the 6th seed, which means they have to match up against the Lakers in the first round. They don't want that. Teams are trying to avoid the Lakers in the early rounds. The Clippers just did it. The other night, the Clippers were playing Houston. They set all of their star players. They set their entire starting lineup, and they lost to Houston. Why is that important? Because now the Clippers are the 4 seed and they have no chance of playing the Lakers in the first round. Now, of course, they'll never tell you they're ducking the Lakers, but we all know that's what it means. It means they would rather play the Lakers down the road instead of in the first round. Makes sense, right? Because if this Lakers team was healthy from start to finish, they would not be a 7 seed. They would not be a 6 seed. So teams clearly do not want to play them in the first round, and rightfully so. So Denver, if they just lose this game to Portland, then they do not have to see the Lakers in the first round. They get to see Portland or Dallas in the first round. So I don't believe that Denver's going to actually play their starters tonight. I believe they will tank this game, which means the Lakers will be in the play-in tournament, which is phenomenal for television ratings and for the NBA, because everyone on Tuesday night is going to be sitting on their couch watching Steph Curry versus LeBron James in a play-in tournament where the winner gets the 7 seed and the loser has to fight for the rest of their lives, fight for their season the next day against the winner of the 9-10. Fascinating, right? Why is it important to me, if I'm a Lakers fan, for the Lakers to get the 7 seed? I think that's what the Lakers want. Because again, I think that they're comfortable winning a play-in game, whether it's against the Warriors, the Grizzlies, the Spurs, whoever. I think they believe they will win one of those games, and I agree with them. After they win one of those games, they will then get the Phoenix Suns as a matchup. Why is this important? Phoenix is a good team, but an inexperienced team, a young team. They have Chris Paul, and that's it. No one else on that team has real playoff experience other than Chris Paul. So you're telling me a team in the Suns will be going up against a player who has more playoff experience than 90% of the league combined in the first round, as well as the defending champions, Anthony Davis? I will take the Lakers, and Vegas would take the Lakers. They would be favored. I guarantee you the Lakers would be favored over the Suns. So their first round matchup, while yes, it would be hard, and it would probably go maybe 5, 6, maybe even 7 games, the Lakers would win that matchup, all right, in my opinion. So getting the 7th seed is actually not that bad of a situation for the Lakers. I don't find it that bad, rather than getting the 6th seed and having to play a very good Denver Nuggets team. Even though they're without Jamal Murray, Denver's good. They got Jokic. Michael Porter Jr. has really come on the scene. He has just been a beast this year. He's looking like the number 1 overall pick that many people thought he would have been if he didn't get hurt while playing at Missouri. Remember, Michael Porter Jr. was the clear number 1 pick that year coming out of the draft, but he had back issues, so he slid all the way down to, I think it was like 9 or 10, and the Nuggets picked him, and he's just been phenomenal since. And he's having his best year as an NBA player this year. So, okay, wow, Memphis taking a big comeback here, 97-100. The Warriors are up by 3 with 3 minutes to go. Wow, what a game. So maybe it won't be the Warriors in that 8 seed. It might be Grizzlies, which would be fascinating in itself. But what a game this has been right now. So that's some of the things that I'm looking at if I'm, as a fan here, as a big-time NBA fan. I'm looking at what are the matchups going to be. In the East, we already know what the play-in tournament is. In the East, the Boston Celtics are the 7, the Washington Wizards are the 8, the Indiana Pacers are the 9, and the Charlotte Hornets are the 10. So on Tuesday, the play-in matchup for the Eastern Conference will be Washington at Boston, and that's another thing that's important. The 7 seed is hosting, and the 9 seed is hosting, right? Because they're the higher seed. So Boston will be hosting Washington for the 7 versus 8, and Indiana will be hosting Charlotte for the 9-10. Those are two fun matchups, right? Again, the winner of the 7-8 becomes the 7 seed. The loser plays the 9-10 to become the 8 seed. The Philadelphia 76ers are the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. Why is that important? There's 3 teams in the East that are the clear favorites in terms of these 3 teams are the teams. If it's whoever's coming out of the East, it's going to be one of these 3 teams. Now, a lot of people believe Miami is a dark horse team that could definitely have a chance to, if they get hot again like they did last year, they could. They definitely could. I don't see that happening. I think they're too banged up. I think everything hit perfect for them last year. I don't see that happening this year. So I'm looking at the 3 teams, Philadelphia, Brooklyn, and Milwaukee. Okay? Philadelphia, Brooklyn, and Milwaukee. Why is it so important and big time for the 76ers that they got the 1 seed? Because now they don't have to see both Brooklyn and Milwaukee. No, they just only have to see one. The 2 versus the 3 will play each other in the semifinals, right? Brooklyn will get to let those 2 hash it out, Brooklyn versus Milwaukee. Philadelphia will get to let those 2 hash it out and then play the winner. So essentially they get to let those 2 teams beat up on each other, and then they'll just have to play one of them instead of both of them. Brooklyn is going to have to play both Milwaukee and Philadelphia if they want to win the East. Milwaukee is going to have to play both Brooklyn and Philadelphia if they want a chance to win the East. Philadelphia, on the other hand, they just get to play the winner of Brooklyn versus Milwaukee. So that's a big part there. So right now, the Eastern Conference, you got the 76ers, the Nets, the Bucks, the Knicks, the Hawks, and the Heat as the 1 through 6 seed, which that Heat-Bucks matchup in round 1 could be fascinating. And then the 7 Celtics, 8 Wizards, 9 Pacers, 10 Hornets. In the West, you've got the Jazz, the Suns, the Nuggets, the Clippers, the Mavericks, and the Trailblazers as the 1 through 6. The Lakers as the 7, the Warriors as the 8, the Grizzlies as the 9, and the Spurs as the 10. Phenomenal stuff, exciting stuff. This is why I love the play-in tournament. It brings some true jazz to the end of the season. It makes these games towards the end actually meaningful. We're talking about it. We're excited about it. And that is super important in my eyes. Also, I'm a huge NBA fan. I love basketball. Even I can admit the first round of the NBA playoffs is not that great. There's usually 2 matchups that are fun and exciting and go 7 games, and everything else is a blowout. Usually the 4 versus 5 or the 3 versus 6. This gives us something fun in the first round. This gives us an intense winner-take-all game, a couple of them from each conference in the first round. It doesn't make the first round such a snooze fest, right? It jazzes it up a little bit. It makes it more exciting. It's not just Philadelphia versus Orlando every year and the Lakers versus who would it be that's the Spurs lately, as of late. Usually the Spurs are up there, but as of late they've been a lower seed, or it's been the Lakers versus the Trailblazers, which has been fun, but it's not as competitive in the first round. When now, Lakers versus Warriors? Come on, baby. Grizzlies versus Spurs, winner take all, loser packs their bags. That's fun. That's exciting. That's why I love the play-in tournament. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to this episode. I really do appreciate you guys for listening. It means a lot. The GSMC Sports Podcast is brought to you, as you guys know, by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you guys please go and remember to subscribe to the show, write a nice review. It really does help us out. Also, if you can, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you. Have a great night. Have fun watching this Sunday. Have fun watching the NBA and NHL playoffs. We'll be back on Wednesday after the play-in games are over to talk about the real NBA playoffs and what happened with each team in the play-in tournament. Can't wait for that. Have a good early start to your week. We'll talk to you again on Wednesday.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.